morning and welcome to Hannover 2026. My name is Noah Cole, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about everyone's favorite topic, industrial AI. I mean, I think it's pretty clear from walking around the show, industrial AI is everywhere. AI is transforming so many aspects of our lives, whether it's manufacturing, design, healthcare, mobility. It's transforming how we design, how we build, and how we operate. But the reality is, when it comes to AI, no company can do this alone. We really need strong partners to make this happen. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, for 2026, how do we scale AI, how do we reshape industry, and how do we really transform real-world operations? So I'd like to welcome to the stage Tony Hemmelgarn, CEO of Siemens Digital Industries Software, and Oliver, CEO of TeamViewer. All right, so Tony, you've spent a big part of your career living and working in Europe. And a lot of people are saying that Europe, when it comes to consumer AI, is a bit behind. But when it comes to industrial AI, Europe has an advantage. So I'm curious, from your point of view, what is it that's giving Europe this advantage in industrial AI?
Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't say I spent a big part of my career in Europe. I was here for a few years running Europe, but I really don't see it as a geographical thing. I really don't. What I see is it's more about what companies want to do and how they want to leverage it and how they want to take advantage of what we're doing. The reason I think there's a big difference between just general AI and what we're doing in industrial AI is in a lot of cases AI is probabilistic, right? It comes up with a few possible answers based on criteria and so forth. Industrial AI, you don't get that choice. It's got to be deterministic. You have to know with the same data, you're going to get the same output every time. You can't have that kind of variability, whether it's a CAE result or it's operational technology running a factory and so forth. And I think the reason that maybe that's happened more here than other parts of the world is maybe because of Siemens and what we're trying to do and bring all this together, being a German-based company, and the work we've done, we've really tried to drive that differentiation between those two different worlds of how people work.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked a lot about data and the importance of data and being able to look at that data. I'm curious, Oliver, for TeamViewer, how do you fit into that landscape in terms of industrial AI and the data?
Yeah, as Tony said, you have to know. I mean, it's deterministic. You have to know the facts. You have to know the data points, as you say. And in industry, data is very distributed. Very distributed. I mean, we work in IT a lot, but we also work in OT, and you have legacy systems, you have brownfield operations, you have all kinds of equipment, all kinds of operating systems. And you need to have a platform that brings this data together from different sources and also makes it accessible again, so makes devices accessible. So we as TeamViewer, we have the platform in between. We provide connectivity to all these devices, IT, OT, and can help you to manage that data.
And I think that the promise of being able to manage that data is part of the reason people are so excited about AI. And if you walk around Hannover, I don't think I've seen a booth that doesn't say AI on it. And lots of companies have started AI pilots, but they're not always succeeding. So Tony, I'm curious, when you talk to our customers, what do you see and where are people getting stuck?
Yeah, I'm often asked, where do you start, right? And I talk about data first. If your data is not well-structured, if your data is not reliable, something you could truly depend on, you got to be careful. And most of our customers, the place they go for that data is Teamcenter, the most proven PLM tool in the world, bar none. And so with that data there, they have this kind of structure they can go to. And recently we had an event where we had the CIO of Applied Materials build on this. And he said, the last thing I need with my data is to go grab some SharePoint file that's 20 years old data that comes in and starts dictating what's happening in my AI. That's not what I want. That's why I use Teamcenter, to make sure I've got data that's current, that's structured. I know where it's applied to the product. And it was funny, a gentleman from Pepsi was sitting right next to him and he said, you know what, if AI went to some of my data in my SharePoint files, my factory would burn down today because the data is obsolete, right? So I put it in perspective, right? You've got to make sure you got the data straight. And the other thing we found was 50% of small, medium businesses today share their PLM data, their CAD data, all these kind of things, is just sitting on their file system. how are you going to do AI if the data is just sitting on your file system? So it's the reason we created Teamcenter X. We allow this to go to the smallest of companies to be able to start organizing your data to be able to leverage AI and do the work we do. So I think it really starts with make sure you got the data straight, and then also put it into a workflow that's a workflow that you understand and use very well. So we created something at Siemens called digital threads. A digital thread says, how do you get from point A to point B to solve some kind of an engineering or manufacturing problem? We use this over and over again with our customers. Because we've used this for so many years, we're now saying, how do we apply agentic to those solutions so that we're going right to specific problems that we've already understood the digital thread and applying it that way?
Oliver, when we're talking about, all the legacy data that's out there, and, as you point out, SharePoint 25 years ago, but that's to say nothing of some system that's 40 or 50 years ago, right? There's all this legacy out there, and we've been trying to modernize it. But, Oliver, I'm curious, how do you connect legacy systems, frontline workers? How do you bring all this together?
Yeah, I think this, so people fail because they don't have enough context, right? So they run an AI experiment, they run an AI pilot or application, and they run it too much in isolation. So they are not able to get out to the front line. They're not able to touch the worker. They're not able to work with the people who are actually doing the work in the field. So what is important that you are fundamentally multimodal. You understand data in the back office, engineering data, design data, product data. You need to understand workflow data, which means machines that are running out there in the field, in factories, shop floor. And you also need to understand how workers are moving in this environment and what they can do and what a worker can do versus what you can do remotely, and or what an agent can do in future now with AI agents coming into the space. So this is all quite a complicated setup, but you can all bring it to one platform. You have one system of record in terms of data. In our collaboration, obviously mostly then Teamcenter, but then get it out there to the front line and back. And that's the platform which you need to have. And then you have end-to-end digital workflows, even complex, and then you can use AI along the way and be more proactive and observe all the time, understand what's happening, analyze what's happening, and from there drive automation, and then potentially using agent as you go along in your project.
Yeah, and you've given a couple examples of the power of agentic AI, and agentic AI are systems that observe, reason, and act. And we have some examples here in our booth of where we see agentic AI having a big impact on industry. But Tony, I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think agentic AI is going to look like for our customers?
We're already doing it. If you walk around, you can see a lot of it within our booths and what we're showing. But back to those digital threads, we have ideas of how to work and do things, and we apply agentic to it. One of our customers, Rolls-Royce, we did a lot of work with setting up a digital representation of the factory. Everything from the manufacturing execution to the plant layout, the process automation, all of these pieces we've laid out. And so once we did all that, we then said, well, now we've got this, we can apply agentic. And so we show an example of how we work with them where they've got an issue in the factory. We identify the issue, and then agentic takes over and starts running us through the change process order of what's actually happening. Going and looking at maintenance material, looking at the product information we already have, makes a recommendation, and then upon that recommendation, it'll ask you, do you want me to actually drive the change process through Teamcenter and Teamcenter Manufacturing and drive it through? Doing those kind of things today, but again, linked back to the digital thread. Where it gets interesting with TeamViewer is, I hear over and over again throughout this show with many customers, the concern about workforce shortage, labor talent, understanding, new workers coming in, and so forth. If I can augment a worker with what I just talked about, with agentic to drive through a change process or a task, and do all of these types of things, imagine now I take it to the next step, which we're already doing with our colleagues with TeamViewer, is to be able to have this augmented capability to be there with that worker, to be able to have both agentic helping them as well as what we can do with an augmented or virtual reality approach to be able to see what's going on. I think that's where our partnership works well. And I think it's why we get so much attention right now from a lot of customers. They're all struggling with that workforce, the frontline workers. How do they get out there and do what they have to do to be able to bring this world together?
Yeah, I think it's the big, if you come to our booth or if you go to many other places of the OEMs, the producers of equipment, machinery, farming equipment, tractors, vehicles, this is the thing where you have a workflow shortage, skill shortage out there in the field, globally distributed out there in the field. It's a pain point for them. It's one thing to design and build the product, but then maintain it in a cost-efficient way, or also make money with it over time. And I think that's where there's lots of opportunities for them now, because there's connectivity to these devices. Their end customers are open for connectivity because they understand the value of AI now. So there's a much, I would say, a very different playing field than a few years ago, where everybody was concerned about access, data sharing. What can you do with my data when I have your product on site? And now I think there's a great opportunity to streamline all these maintenance, repair, and optimization procedures if you work together with the product data and the frontline worker at the end. And there, when you can have agents coming in and do more remotely and have a more fluid handover between an agent and an actually person working, I think that's where you can get significant benefits.
Well, I mean, when we imagine this world where you're going to have humans working alongside agents, how do we do that in a way that's safe? And how do we make sure that the frontline workers are interacting with the agents in the right way?
Yeah, so I think data governance is key in this one. I think what is very important is you have the full context, as I said before, but you also work with trusted partners. So you have data handover points, you have data sharing points. You need to get the full context together. You need to constantly observe and monitor what's going on in your equipment, in IT devices, OT devices, frontline workers. So observing this, understanding this, analyzing this in a trusted way, together with partners that have other parts of the data for the full context, I think is incredibly important. And that's why I also believe that this is an ecosystem play to win. This is the leading companies working together to share and exchange and then build digital threads, workflows. There's obviously a lot of talk about smaller companies coming up, building agents and optimizing a given system, given process, given workflows. And I think that's incredibly difficult. I think people overstating that opportunity, because you need to have access to data, share, trust, understand workflows, and do this together. And that's, I think, what's needed.
I mean, we've been talking.
Say, building on that, though, quickly, is the reason I talked about having data that's dependable, structured, and reliable. What we show when we create agentic or any type of tool, going through the data and making the analysis, we have full traceability through Teamcenter to know where those documents came from. It's not coming from a 20-year-old SharePoint place. It's coming from a place in Teamcenter that you can identify and verify that it had the right sources of data to come back with its solution. Full traceability all the way through.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been working on for a long time. Is we've been trying to bring IT and OT together. So trust and data and context has always been important, but it's now more important than ever. And so what we see is AI accelerating this journey that we've been on to bring IT and OT together. So I'm curious, what do you see about that acceleration in terms of AI's ability to do that, Tony? And for Oliver, how does TeamViewer specifically going to help make that happen?
Yeah, I'll start with, if you just walk over there and take a look at the Pepsi example, it's IT-OT convergence. It's IT design and layout of the factory with our traditional tools that we've done for factory optimization, plant layout, and so forth. And then once you have that, now I can see it, view and operate and understand what's happening in that factory from an operational point of view. IT-OT convergence right there in that demo, showing what's going on. And we have so much interest because of the desire to be able to see and be able to simulate and maybe do what-if scenarios, and then eventually even drive what's happening in the factory with what we call executable digital twin, where we actually load the digital twin on edge devices that are running the factory using the same physics and math and all the work that we do within our software tools. That's where it gets really exciting.
And how does TeamViewer?
Yeah, as I said, you have to have the full context, and that by definition stretches IT/OT. There is no full context without IT/OT convergence. So most of our customers, I would say, are using TeamViewer across these two domains already for a very long time. There was always the USP of TeamViewer was that we're not only connecting every IT infrastructure component and every operating system and can see every device, but we stretch that to OT devices which are out there in the field, even if it's at very small and old operating systems which are somewhere in the shop floor. So that's very important. That's happening now as we speak. And what you get into this now with AI is you get proactiveness, because you can constantly observe these devices, you can analyze the behavior of these devices, and thereby you can get the idea that you have in IT, which is proactive IT management, so fix issues before they come up, what you call DEX, Digital Employee Experience, which we do in IT, you can bring that idea to OT now, because you can do DEX and OT, because all of these devices are connected to the same platform, and you have the insights and the data from back-end systems, and out of that, you create a view and a forecast and an idea of what can happen next and what you should address next.
And I think you've given a great example of some of the things that TeamViewer does that we can't do on our own.
Yeah.
And that's why we partner together. And so, Tony, I'm curious if, from your perspective, if you can talk a little about the partnership and really what TeamViewer is bringing to Siemens.
Yeah, it's interesting. Since I've been in the job, I think I've done close to 40 acquisitions of companies, small, large, whatever. And the team approached me a few years ago and said, we need to buy a company for AR, VR. And I said, you know what, if I see one more demo of somebody wearing a goggle set and doing this with their hands, and I said, I've seen 100 of those. They go nowhere. I said, I'd rather partner with someone that is more pragmatic, has real use cases, real work that they're doing, and that's what we saw with TeamViewer. And so I think our partnerships worked well because we're very pragmatic as well with our solutions. I don't want to see the demo that looks like just this crazy demo. I want to see how is it going to work, and I think that's why it's worked well with us.
Yeah, you have I think that's a good point. Pragmatic is a good point. I mean, I think the industry has gone too fancy in some places. If you talk to industrial customers, they have a very hands-on problem. People in a warehouse doing the job with a very high attrition, and they need to get people productive within a day. That's a very clear problem statement where you need to have a workflow. It's simple. It's not complicated. It's simple, but it needs to work every day in, day out, 8 hours a day under very different circumstances in high velocity. This is the stuff we're doing. Or if you look at repair, maintenance work, very remote, semi-trained expert, knows aircraft engines, but not that specific problem, needs workflows. And we provide those workflows on whatever device in a very pragmatic way so that it fits within the environment of the customer and is not something esoteric VR-based where people cannot make use of.
So we're going to imagine if our customers adopt these solutions and we think forward 5 years in the future, and we're here at Hannover, what's going to look different? So I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to say, what's going to be different when we're here 5 years in the future in Hannover 2031?
Well, I've always said in software, if you're guessing beyond 3 years, you're kidding yourself. So at 5, none of us will know. But I would think it's even more aggressive today. Think about agentic just 12 months ago. How much agentic's changed in the last 12 months. So I think it's going to be hard to predict exactly where we're going to be. But I think it still follows the same lines. This idea that you've got the data, you've got the use cases, we've got the digital thread of how we go through this. How do we drive it? I think you'll see a lot more of that running through all of our products and our partnership with TeamViewer as well.
I would think you see, so agentic will be very important. I think you will see even more and tighter partnerships, because I do believe from a customer perspective, it's still too heterogeneous in terms of provider landscape and offerings. I think you have so many companies that say the same thing and try to do the same thing. I think there will be more partnering and more consistent end-to-end processes so that large customers can actually work with it day in, day out.
Great. Well, we are almost out of time, so I want to thank both of you for joining us today. It's really clear that the future of AI is going to be shaped by industry leaders like yourselves. So I really appreciate you sharing your point of view with us today.
Thank you.
So we have some gifts for you.
Oh,
Oliver, from our customers at Natura.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, for you also from Natura. You all
Okay.
get, and Noah, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Great job. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Round of applause.